Hello everybody and welcome to Rolling Intentions. My name is Jason. So today I thought I would bring it back a bit, the kind of to the roots of how, or why I even opened this channel to begin with. And it's been on the go for quite some time, and there's been many changes in my life over the past, I guess like 7 to 8 years or more. It could be longer than that. It could be like 10 to 12. Oh man, is this channel that old? I don't understand. Anyways, I don't even know how I still got followers, to be honest, because I don't put out a lot of content. But nevertheless, though, yeah. So essentially, this website started off as a role-playing website, hence Rolling Intentions. That was sort of the concept. There was you were rolling your intentions, and a lot of the times we talked about indie games, especially, so it's very niche with regards to the content that we produce and still produce, I guess. But I mean, as well as yeah, it was based on role-playing games. We used to go to public, well, I guess go to people doing Kickstarters or people who were trying to self-publish their books and such, try out a test of their game. And then come back with some information, maybe to kind of, give them advice or even a review, and then even have an interview with them afterwards. And I mean, really, we're not really in the spot to give people advice for making games, but that was kind of how we originated. And back then, there was a theory that it is still around, I suppose, especially if you do a search on the internet, called the GNS Theory. So you're probably wondering, well, what is this GNS Theory? What are you talking about? Is some type of conspiracy? But no, it's not. So GNS stands for Gamist, Narrative, and Simulism, I guess, or Gamism, Narrativism, and Simulism. Now, when you kind of think of it outside the box, it doesn't mean a whole lot. It's just three different types of I guess some people could say ideas behind games, I guess. So first of all, I want to go through a couple different things here on this video, whether or not they're informative or not, we'll see. So first of all, I'm going to explain what GNS is. I want to go through another one here, which is, does system matter? System now with regards to, we're talking about role-playing games at this point, so does the role-playing system actually matter when you're playing it? The other thing we're going to talk about is why Ron Edwards, who is the creator of the GNS system, which I'm going to go, theory, why he closed down the Forge, which is where he posted and where a lot of game designers and even indie enthusiasts went there quite a bit, and I mean, it was the hot spot. But anyways, it closed down, so we're going to find out probably why Ron Edwards decided that in the early 2000s it was time to close down the site and move on. And where does games or role-playing games in general go from here? So first of all, let's talk about what is GNS. So GNS is the Gaming, Narratives, and Simulism concept. So the concept is there are three different types of people and games and gamers that play. So like, for instance, if you are somebody who is more into the gamist side of things, gamist people generally have an objective. They're about winning. So what a very I guess popular type of role-playing game that supports that type of personality would be like Dungeons and Dragons. While it does have a storyline, there is a lot of opponents that you're up against, and you're going to be defeating the opponents and gain experience. So basically, it's a risk-reward system with an end. Now, I know not most gamisms, I guess, more perceived to like games like, I don't know, like Monopoly or something, like a board game that is a very closed concept. So like, I would never say that Dungeons and Dragons is a gamist system completely, because it's so open-ended. unlike probably like Gloomhaven, which is more streamlined because you can only follow the guidelines of the rules. You can't really break from that unless you're going outside of the rule book and such. And D&D lets you kind of gives you the tools for everything, and you can decide which tools you want to use and which ones you want to discard at the GM's discretion. So but anyways, I'm just giving you an example of how a personality who enjoys gamism would enjoy playing games, where it would be I'm winning, or I'm besting something, or I'm besting the GM, or that kind of stuff. So the other part would be narratism. So in a role-playing setting, narratism comes up fairly often. You want to narrate, you want to involve, be immersive, and that kind of stuff. And when people say, do you want, are you playing your character? A lot of the times they're referring to, are you doing what your character would do without outside factors such as, chatter among the table or your personal biases and views. Now, you can't play a role-playing game and have the same knowledge and biasisms as your character would, because it is coming from the player. So the knowledge obviously is limited, and as well as there are capabilities of being social. If they have a high charisma or have a high social skill, you can't just have that. So a lot of times it comes down to game mechanics to kind of make the difference. But with narratism, it's not all about just play your character. There's more to it than that. The difference between, let's say, somebody saying, would your character do that? What is your intention? What is your intentions? A lot of the times, narrative systems, or at least narrative personalities, I guess, that like playing narrative games, enjoy taking the role and kind of mixing it with the GM. So what a narrative personality would be who plays these games would be, they would like to play their character and have some type of either moral compass dilemma, or something a little more involved than what the story is. Obviously, they don't like being streamlined. They don't like being railroaded. When it comes to narrative, players in general, they want to be able to. It's not about the dice so much, or I guess it could be about the dice, but it's more about the actions and the result and a motive, more so than the result. It's almost like they want to have this big intent and motive, and it maybe seem a little unrealistic or something, but they want to be able to do that because it fulfills them, right? It's not like winning to somebody who enjoys playing games to win, versus somebody who likes to play and have these moral dilemmas, or these things that make them think about, not only about what their character would do, but actually take the role of the GM and say, I'm going to kind of streamline my character with its own storyline in line with the GM. So a lot of the games that fall under the narratism, I guess, would be something like Dogs in the Vineyard, where it's a sandbox RPG. The players are put into a town, and the GM, all they really have at their disposal is they have a couple characters and a couple of different situations they put into the sandbox that the players have to go fish out and find themselves. So they're not really directed on what to do. The players kind of find their own interest, and then the GM is supposed to respond to the players and what they find interesting, versus the GM will guide the group to what he or she thinks is interesting, and then the players react to that instead. So there's a difference, right? The roles are reversed with narrative. And then there's also simulationism, I guess, simulationism. It's hard to these words, which is realistic. like realism. When it comes to being super realistic about things, these are the people that want it. They want the realism, the idea that you get shot with a gun, you're not just going to be like, ow, I guess that's a point, a hit point off me or something like that. They want to feel like the real life struggles. They want to have something more historical, so something that's more realistic. Probably not so much with with these other types of factors. I mean, magic can still come into play and such, but a lot of the times it's the idea of illusion. So it's about, if it's reality plus a bit of illusion of that reality put on, but doesn't stray too far from the core. So a lot of people who enjoy that, they like those struggling games, I guess, those ones like Call of Cthulhu, where you're always wondering when your character's just gonna drop dead or go insane. So that's kind of like the concept, and those three are what Ron Edwards, who is the person who kind of came up with this whole theory based off of another three-tiered theory from earlier in 1997, I believe. He kind of said that all games kind of fall under these categories, and players kind of are drawn to it based on these things, and it's usually a mix, right? So like when I was talking about Dungeons and Dragons earlier, while that has games elements like hit points and you're subtracting your numbers by someone else's numbers, and kind of whoever got the biggest numbers wins, it does come with a bit of a probably not so much narrativism, but it does come with definitely simulism, right? Where once you are hit, and once you are dead or dying, or once you hit these certain walls, then your character could die, right? With a narrative idea, your character would not die right away. Like they would, if they ever fall to the ground, they would be like hanging on until that last moment, so they can tell their loved one or whatever it is, the final words, or have some dramatic scene or some dramatic ending, and that kind of fits with a narrative setting. But I know now with the newest one, I guess 5th edition they did implement some of the new narrative, I guess, more new age role-playing elements into the game, and I've noticed that also with the Star Wars game as well. So people are dabbling with this idea. They're just not coming out and saying it. They're just it's they're dabbling with these three concepts, trying to make the ultimate game. But well, that's it, right? That's the idea. So, and yeah, so like you've got like the three main different types here, right? Like for instance, I'm just going to bring up some real quick here just so I can kind of go over it. But, like the game is narrative fiction. So like those are the people who, in moments where things get dramatic. So, for them, people who are a mix of like gameists and narratives, they enjoy the intensity of possibly losing. And, with these are situations, it's mostly about, can I overcome something? Can I overcome this issue? And it appeals to a lot of people. It really does. I mean, the idea of facing an enemy and then overcoming it, like a dragon or a lich or some crazy enemy like that, they're like, oh, I heard about the Trusk, oh, what's going on, how do we defeat it? And coming up with these little plan strategies and thinking outside the box. I mean, that is fun, right? So and that appeals to a lot of people, and I feel like those are something with a true goal, right? So like you'll talk about, okay, let's at the very beginning you're like a level 1 party, and you're building up, but you always know that there is some impending either kingdom, political thing, or like some big dragon that's causing havoc, and you can't fight that dragon because you're only level 1. You have an idea of like what kind of statistics the creature would have, so you need to build up in order to get that creature, right? So there's the game aspect, right? It's almost like you're working towards small victories for a bigger one. but you have a set goal. And a lot of times that goal is set by the GM, but you know what? Sometimes players set their own personal goals, which I believe is part of the narrative side of that gaming, not so much the other way around. And, you know, there's also another common one is the narrative simulist. You know, the idea of keeping it real, but also being put into like really unlikely situations. You know, and these are, and to be honest, like in this sense here, when even like I'm just scanning over it real quick here, while I'm thinking about it, you know, these are the ones where I guess it's all about, you know, consistency, right? So if your character, this is when you say to somebody, you know, you're playing your character, you know, so you're playing a narrative, but you're trying to be realistic. So it's like, would your character realistically do that? Would your character realistically go and do this? Or, you know, you're lawful good, therefore, like, would your character, you know, do these negative acts? Or, you know, would they pass by a starving person and not feed them? And sometimes it leads to really weird assumptions with this type of mix. But you know, I think it's pretty fine. I mean, I think one thing in particular this kind of appeals to are a lot of people who are in LARP, so live action role play, because you know it is realism because you're actually in the real world. And you have physical limitations, but the narrative part, of course, a lot of the times with LARP is you are playing the character yourself, you know, doing the actions, you know, you are being somebody else in that situation, and that is 100% narrative. I mean, you are the game mechanics don't even come to play half the time in LARPs. You know, it's only when something comes up or a situation that they need to kind of confirm. Most of it's conversation, right? Most of it is you doing something. You're not going out and fist fighting with every single person in the, you know, in the area, unless like it's some type of reenacting battle or you know, you're in a guild. But a lot of the times you are playing the person, you know, and this goes for like for chat type of role play as well. They fall into the same thing, a narrative simulist. They want to be the person, therefore they're going to make the realistic actions while playing the character and being real about it, and they take it seriously, and that's great. I guess the last type of combination that there could be is a gamist simulist, and I mean that's what people state that life, you know, is unfair. So you know, while in a gamist narrative situation, there may not be, you know, a true goal in mind. You know, you're playing until you retrieve enough of the story, you know, try to come to an output. But a lot of the times narrative and gamist conflict a lot because they're kind of conflicting in nature. But the gamist and simulist is definitely what most places go with. Most games go with the idea that you're playing in a realistic situation with game mechanics like hit points and, you know, chance and dice and such. You know, the idea with that is that anytime you go into a situation that's risky, you have a chance of probably dying, because that's the way the real world is. Everything's a risk, and gamists are like, can I overcome that risk? So it appeals to them. And the simulist side would be like, is it, you know, so risky that, you know, my character could end up being dead or injured or overcome by grief or something like that, you know? Yeah, so I mean, those are the kind of like the three different types. I know I kind of, with the gamist narrative, I kind of said, you know, they want to talk about like goal conditions and such, but it really is impossible. It's hard to have a narrative game and then you're playing it like a game that has more game mechanics, it's difficult. But yeah, just to go down through, I guess a little bit more about that before I run off on a tangent here, is that these three different types are not only the way that you can create games, it's also a way that people can interact with them. So you can make a game that appeals to people who are more swayed into the narrative side. You can make a game like an RPG, like that sways more towards the simulist, and there are games that sway towards the gamist. Not everybody's a 50-50 split, so some people enjoy one more than other, and yeah. So I think in general that's what it is. It's the theory is a concept of three different types of personality traits, I guess, / gaming development that can get mixed and sometimes don't lead to a positive experience. So let's go to the next thing here right now, which is does system matter? So the guy who created this I guess theory did write an article that says system does matter, and tried to explain how a lot of the game industry, role-playing game industry at the time, had a bit of a flaw. And if you look back in the early 2000s, if you are kind of like in the niche of like of this type of stuff, you'll probably know that early 2000s was kind of like the birthplace for a lot of these changes in role-playing games. And those changes came from a very different place than, let's say, GURPS, or I don't know, D&D, Dungeons and Dragons is one. I mean, that's everybody knows, but like there are these systems that came out around that time, and they were less about the game and more about how to play the game. So what I mean by that is not all of them had really complicated mechanics. However, the narrative part of the mechanics could be complicated. An example of that would be most likely Burning Wheel. So if you ever played Burning Wheel or ever seen Burning Wheel, doesn't matter the edition, you're probably going to notice there's a bit going on here. So if you take, let's say, the first edition of the game, it came at two or three books, right, which they were like soft cover, and you would only get 2 books starting out, and then you can purchase the other one. So what you would get is you would get the rule book, which tells you how to play, which is unnecessary, and then you get like a character book. The character books, they were about the same size actually, and while you would think one was like, the rule book, and the other one was like a player's guide, kind of like how D&D set it up. No, it's nothing like that. So with this game, you had it was kind of like a simple system. You had D6s. You rolled D6s, and if you got a 4, 5, and 6, you succeeded. If you got 1, 2, and 3, you didn't succeed. And there would be, you would do tests. So you'd be like, well, what's your survival? Okay, this is what it is. Perfect. So you get that many dice. So your survival's 3, you get 3 dice, and then the person would say, I'm going to go ahead and set an obstacle because of what you're trying to do. You're trying to set up a camp for, I don't know, a group of 10 people. I'm going to say that's like an 4 or 5. And those obstacles are kind of written in the book about how you can kind of determine how difficult something is. And then the player then would have to look at the dice. Obviously, he doesn't have enough, even if he succeeded in all of them, because you have to get successes equal to the obstacle. So then, they start asking for help. They start going around talking to the people like in their party, I guess, and asking for help to see if they can get a helping die, to kind of help their situation. So the concept is not hard, and it does get a little bit into the weeds when you start getting into detailed combat. I won't get into that in this video, but Burning Wheel itself, I will probably do a review on that system. And it'll go all smooth until we get to the combat system, and then things will just be like, this game is really, really hard. But anyways, so we'll just skip that. But like the character book itself is mostly life paths. So what that means is when you play this game, the first thing you have to decide as a group is what sort of game you want to play. So everybody pitches, so you can, like, even the GM can pitch, and everybody kind of adds on to a pitch until they say, this is a concept of a character I want to make. And then they have to go to the character book, and then they go, well, how many life paths do we get? So then the next thing you know is you're going through these life paths, pathing out your character's life from birth to, you know, early childhood to adulthood, and you're just like, you know, in these pathways will change your character, and they change what your character did and what your character does. And sometimes you have to like lose statistics on, or change statistics on your character, because it doesn't make sense that a noble person who was nobility ended up becoming a peddler, right? So then it's going to be like, well, how did you get to, you know, being like a person who just sells like shoes on the street? Well, this is how I did it, and these are the stats that, you know, I had the steps I had to take in order to do it, and these is my third life path, and, you know, and these are the skills I developed, these social skills. And so like it tells a story. Like, you literally just creating the character using these life paths, you can tell your character's story. It goes into like the details of like who your friends are, who your enemies are, you know, what is your relationship with your parents. Like, it's intense. Like, it's like, what are you, fourth born? Are you third born? Like, where are you two in the series of, are you a middle child? Are you the eldest? You know, what's your relationship with your family? What you know, what are your sources? Like, who do you know? Like, what is your contacts? Like, this game is perfect narrative game. Even the character creation itself, 100% narrative. It does have a little bit of gaming aspect, like all games do, but it really, really focuses on narrative, which, when we're talking about, does system matter? Well, I think personally, the system definitely has an involvement, right? Like, you could play the same game and change the rules in order to add in a certain element. Sure, easy to do. You know, a lot of games let you do that, especially the older ones, where they're not so tight on the rules. And you can really kind of do whatever you want. You know, a lot of the times they don't tell you, you know, this is how we want you to play. This is the overall rules, and you can pick and choose what rules you want to use. So you can kind of make any game with that. Like Dungeons and Dragons. I bring that up a lot because, like, who doesn't know what Dungeons and Dragons are, right? And, you know, you can literally take that system and strip it down to whatever you want and play that. I think the only thing it falls short on, at least for the earlier editions from 4th, I haven't quite dabbled into 5th, is the way diplomacy works. I don't really like that, and because I don't really feel like it has enough attention, because combat takes so much of the book that just like a 2-paragraph thing of like how to roll diplomacy and how it changes people's personalities towards you, or views towards you, or their status towards you, just feels cheap. But yeah, I mean, but that's an example, right? And it, you know, it's so like when these games came out in the early 2000s, there was a lot of stir up among people who were looking for something different, and I personally was not looking for something different. I wanted to play, D&D. Now, I did have my own game that I've developed at the time, which was pretty meh, to say the least. But there's a lot of differences in between what was at the time, early early 2000s, late 90s, well, actually, even not even early 2000s, more like 2008, 2007 kind of era. And yeah, so then these developers are coming out with these other games that had nothing, had very, some of them are rules like, because a lot of people, when they think of narrative games, they think of rules like games where people are more up to just do whatever and then don't let the rules interfere with you, kind of thing. I don't think that's true. I think that's a really bad way of looking at narrative games. But there is a lot of games that kind of fit that niche. Like Mouse Guard is a rules like game that came from Burning Wheel. Keep that in mind, which was not a very easy game when you start getting into the weeds. What other games is there? I guess like Fiasco, right? Those type of games were very rules light, heavily narrative, 100% narrative. I'm not saying it's not a narrative game, just because most of it's conversation. You're talking about stuff, and there's a risk factor, right? But yeah, like you can look at some of the stuff that I've done since the starting this channel, and I talk about this a lot, about the narrative and such. And I personally believe systems do matter with regards to playing games. You could play Elden Ring and enjoy it and love it, and then you could play Elder Scrolls and hate it because one was more drawn than the other to you as an individual, right? Even though they are both sandbox games, which have open world exploration. I guess they're not sandbox games, but they're open world exploration. So you can go anywhere, do anything you want, but not everybody who likes Elden Ring likes Elder Scrolls, which are so similar sounding. But yeah, I mean, that's just how it is. So I think that the games do matter. I think that like in the world of role-playing games, I think it does. I don't think you should just think that I could take a game like Dungeons and Dragons and then chop it up to make it into a game that my players will enjoy, instead of going, what other games are out there that my group will enjoy and myself more, or what will give me and my group, or even what does the group think? What do they want? And it's the one big issue is going outside of your comfort zone. Obviously, that's a big thing. Nobody wants to go outside, learn a new set of rules for a game, just so they can have a different experience. But I will tell you that if you've only played one or two systems, yeah, there's a lot out there, and each time you play, it's a different experience. It's not the same. Role-playing games are not the same. Like, you can't go, well, I played role-playing games. I played D&D. I played them all. Played D&D first edition, second edition, third edition. I played them all. It's like, well, okay, but your experience with that game is great. I mean, you're playing a game that you enjoy, and it doesn't matter if you want to branch out or not. That's something you enjoy. That's perfect. But for those who play D&D and don't feel like they fit into the group, or don't feel like, oh geez, this is this game is very combat heavy, I kind of want something else. Oh, let's go ahead and start tweaking the rules and make my own D&D homebrew. Look to see what's out there. Like, you can, if you want to make a D&D homebrew, that's awesome. I think that's the way of doing it. When it comes to not having to relearn things. But if you go out and take a look at all these different games, narrative, simulus, whatever types of different styles of games there are, you might learn something you enjoy, right? Like you may go, geez, this is a concept I never thought about for a role playing game. I didn't think about having these goals set for my character, and these relationship points would do anything for me. Like you'll learn something, right? And then you can add that to your homebrew if you need to have that basis. I think it's great. So I really do think the system does matter. And if you don't believe system matters because you can basically take a system and hack it up to wherever you want, then guess what you're doing? You're just changing the system. So system does matter. You're still making changes to the system in order to make it fit you and your group. So otherwise you would just play the game as is written in the book. You wouldn't make changes, right? Anyways, that's just my opinion on it. But yeah. So in the question, does system matter? I would say yes, and I gave some examples why. So the next thing would be, why did Ron Edwards stop the Forge forum? So if you don't know what the Forge is, it's a forum that was back, I guess, early 2000s. And I don't know if it stuck around for more than like 6 years or so. I don't think it was around that long. Maybe longer. Probably longer. But anyways, it had some really interesting people in there. So I caught it only towards the end, unfortunately. So when I got into narrative games and stuff in general, I kind of was at the very far point. So that's when people were already making podcasts about it quite a bit. So and I kind of missed the thing quite like I am now, seeing how it's like 2022 and I'm talking about this thing that's pretty much been done with by every person that enjoys narrative games. But anyways, but yeah, so he opened up this forum and started talking about this new theory, and you know what, a lot of game developers joined. So some of the ones that in particular is like Luke Crane, who developed several, or has been in development with several games. So he originally developed the Burning Wheel system, and then Bloodstained Stars, or Bloodstained something. It's something to do with space. It's Burning Wheel in space. That's all I remember. And there was a lot of those game developers on there, so you literally talk to them. It was really cool. And I do remember, David Peter, no, sorry, not David Peterson. Almost made a mistake. Vincent D. Baker. He posted some stuff on there, and that was like rare. You hear him around. And the games that came out were, I don't know, man. Like, it reminds me of the 90s. Like when the games came out, they didn't just go, let's trickle in narrative into our games, no, let's hit them over the head with narrative and moral dilemma and stuff. Like Vincent Baker was notorious for that, right? Like, so he made Dogs in a Vineyard, which is basically extremely anti-Christian game, because you play as these dogs, or as these not actual dogs, but as these like religious fanatical type, or at least maybe not fanatical, but you came from like the god of light, and you go to these towns, and it could be a low I guess it depends, low fantasy or high fantasy setting, depending upon what you guys discussed. And you're in there like talking to your cousins and stuff, because it's like based off like Utah. And you find out that somebody says that somebody may be possessed or something like that, and then you're wondering, well, are they actually possessed? Because a lot of the times in this game, if you have any dealings with evil, the devil, then your character, something bad would happen to the town. So like in the idea of Dogs in the Vineyard is that bad things only happen if somebody done something evil in the town. So you're literally going, somebody like something really horrible happened, like somebody went and like now they're missing or something. Oh, somebody did something evil, so we're gonna find out what that is. And uncovering that stuff can be a real moral dilemma, and a lot of the times the game pushes you to do that. It wants you to feel like you're put in these situations where, you know, because the book of the, you know, the Lure of Life kind of book, you know, talks about, you know, these very conservative views, we'll say, right? And a lot of people who play these games are not super conservative, so having to enforce those things, especially like homosexuality, you know, being like a sin, which is causing people harm to everybody because evil is brought in through a focal point. Otherwise it would be utopia, but because this person, you know, enjoys, you know, something they deem as sinful, then that person is causing all this evil to happen, and then you as a dog will have to go fish out, find out what's going on, and deal with it, and then make the decision. And then the decisions are made using I don't know, I'm getting so in depth in this, but anyways, the decisions are made kind of like poker. You have a bunch of like little stats that you kind of create themselves. They're kind of like narrative stats where you assign dice to them. One should be like I got one good eye. You know, maybe that's like a D4, so that's a detriment because you've got one eye that's good, but one eye that's bad, or maybe it's a bonus like a D6. And then you're putting all these like little narrative little things there, and then you're using those in your story. So then you'd be like, well, I'm gonna, you know, stare at him, or I'm gonna, you know, do these type of things, and then you're using that one good eye or whatever as part of your dice. So when you go to roll like against them, there's 3 different, you know, you'll be like, okay, well, roll your dice and I'll roll mine, and then you start pitching highest versus highest to try to knock off, you know, the other person's opposing rolls. So anyways, I'm explaining it poorly. It's a really interesting system. The whole system is all about just, oh, okay, you start off with a conversation, then you start getting into kind of like a confrontation, which is not non-violent but still physical, and then you start getting into a physical violent confrontation, and then you start getting all out, taking out guns and just shooting each other and killing each other, which becomes like a kill conflict. So then these conflicts can stir up from anything. Like you just talk to a kid on the street and you want to win this argument with this child, and the next thing you know, you're pushing that child around because you're trying to convince them that what they're doing is wrong, and they're like saying, no, I'm not going to do it, and their decisions all based on how many, you know, dice they got left in the pool. So you can only when you get all their dice out of their pool will you be able to convince them, you know, maybe to do it the safe way. But the game always pushes you to, well, are you willing to take out your gun and threaten this person in order to, you know, in order to convince them? Are you going to shoot them? You know, you're going to shoot their family? Like, what are you going to do, right? And anyways, game is great, and Vincent Baker is a genius. But yeah, then there's like kill puppies for Satan. Yeah. So, right? I mean, Vincent Baker, you're a troll. At least you were. Because, anyways, but like, yeah. So these games hit you over the head, like the '90s with the, you know, the gross culture, which was like, you know, the edgy kind of thing. I think the early 2000s was like the edge culture for role-playing games. I really feel like that. I don't know. I think probably somebody else can mention something back in the 60s or 70s or 70s or 80s that probably were like that too. But to me, that's how I feel about it. And they really hit you over the head with this narrative stuff. So why did he close the forums? Well, I think it's because, you know, he come to a realization that games are starting to move more towards narrative. That, you know, the games, the reason he created the Forge originally was to show there's more than just making the same game over and over again, which was essentially, here's your hit points, here's your concept, here's your thing, here's your dice roll. We could do better. And I think that now with the a lot of times, a lot of people right now, a lot of game developers are taking narrative seriously. They're adding into the games, like even D&D 5th edition, and as well as the Star Wars RPG, which are kind of popular, right? They fit the narrative stuff in there now. So like it got serious. They got serious about it. So you're starting to see that more about relationships and moral dilemmas, and not all about, can I defeat the evil guy because I'm the good guy, and here's my numbers, and my numbers are bigger than your numbers, so I win, right? So I'm glad that there was an influence made, and we're seeing changes in the system. And I think that Ron Edwards seen the same thing, that he's seen that systems are starting to change towards it. Systems still do matter, though. I'm still not going to say that just because D&D adds a friend meter in their game that suddenly now I'm going to be convinced that this game is the one game to rule them all, and you don't need to play anything else. I say still get out there, play some games, even one-offs, just to see how things work. And where does games go from here? Well, like I kind of gave a little bit of a brief summary there, that we're headed towards something more fulfilling. Role-playing games in general are not just about getting your friends together to roll some dice and move across the board. That's a great concept, by the way. I really like that. 4th edition I enjoy. I know everybody's gonna say no, 4th edition sucked, but I enjoyed it. It did what it did good. It took the concept of being what originated from a tabletop strategy game and making it a perfect repetition of that with some role-playing elements added onto it, kind of like how Gloomhaven is, kind of like Descent, so I know like that's not what people want to hear for role-playing games, but I think for 4th did a really good job for that. And they're still making lots of RPGs out there. So, I mean, you can certainly go on Kickstarter to take a look to see what's coming out. There are hit and misses. I've done misses on this channel where we're just like, we thought it was going to be good, and maybe we played it wrong, but it's the risk and reward sometimes when it comes to role-playing games. And there's some hits. I did have a couple things to say about, like, with regards to how I wished things would go with games. I really think there should be a genre of role-playing games that are fitted more towards the type of players versus a setting. To me, it's like, it doesn't matter if it's a fantasy setting, if it's a modern setting, or, I mean, it does matter to a point, but I mean, like, with regards to what type of game it is, to me, it's who does this appeal to? And I think that would be interesting. This appeals to people who enjoy more a high risk gameplay. People who want to have more fortune in their dice rolls, or more drama, these type of things. And setting, I think, it's only one part of a game, right? I really think it is, and I think that giving the role to the GMs in traditional games have a lot on their plate, right? Like, they gotta make a world most of the time, not always, and then they have to like create NPCs, create characters, or even like have to like purchase and read an entire module in order to kind of find out what happened, and then try to get the module to compare to what you're playing. And I mean, it's totally possible. Obviously, we've been doing it for years, but I think it would be a good experience for people who only played a GM in these type of games to play as a GM in one of the narrative games, and you'll find out that a lot of your GM weight and preparation and such kind of gets lifted a little bit, because you're more dependent upon your players to come up with concepts. And you know what? Sometimes players are more creative than the GMs are, to be honest. And the bonuses with that type of concept is that if the players are telling you they're interested in something and you do it, guess what? They're going to be more interested in what they're doing because they already expressed to you what's interesting. So anyways, now I didn't go over everything with regards to GNS. I didn't go over all the other terms here. So like there are certain things that are determining factors and such. I don't know. I didn't go over it because I mean, to me it's obvious, right? When it talks about, you know, what type of system something is. Like, is it a fortune system, which is like you're using dice or cards or something? In this case here, it'd be like karma, which is a fixed value that decides results. So therefore, like if you have 3 of this, you get what you want. One of Trail of Cthulhu was good for that because Trail of Cthulhu was something you could play over email, which is I played over Gmail. And it really was like, if you went into a certain room, if an investigator was in the room with this type of stat, this number of stat, then they were able to uncover this certain thing, and there was no dice rolls. It was just these are the numbers, and if you interact with certain things that you have the numbers, you win. Not win, you get what the information you need. So Trail of Cthulhu was good for that, but I didn't really want to kind of get into that too much because that was done by someone else, I think, not really done by the person who created the GNS. But it is interesting to know that when you're developing games, or when you're playing games, or even when you're GMing games, there's so many factors involved, and I think you would be doing yourself a disservice if you think that there is only one way to play a game. And I enjoy most of the games, but not all. So anyways, I'm wondering what you think about all that. I'm sure I did go through quite a bit of information there. I didn't get into like the history of like where it originates from or anything like that, but I know that right now there's a lot of critiques and a lot of it used to be a lot of controversy about this because it would have been traditional players versus narrative players or new age players, and then they would kind of be at it. I'm trying to be more peaceful here, saying that all games are great. And if someone says to me, well, maybe you should try out D&D 5th edition, and I'm going to say you already trying to play it, because I love playing games, and role-playing games are just one of my big ones. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching. If you like what you see, please subscribe below, and let me know in a comment what your take is of what the GNS system is. Does system matter? Does it matter that you're playing one system, or do you think that you can pretty much take any system or a particular system that you prefer and make it into whatever you want, and everything I'm saying is garbage? But anyways, thanks so much for watching, guys. Have yourself a good day.